Hello, and welcome to the long-awaited return of David's Divergent Discussions. I am your host, David Gray Hammond. Here with me is my wonderful host, Katie Munday.
Hello.
We're going to talk about gay shit.
Yay! Do not do it enough.
No, and as I said to you before we come on, I think there's going to be a conversation to be had about the fact that I tend to keep my queerness at arm's length. I think that's definitely going to come up. That'll be a talking point. Remember, if you're in the comment section, you can interact with us. We can pin your comments to the screen. So do ask questions, do make comments. Don't be a dick because I'll have to block you. You know, it's a thing. Some people aren't nice. Maybe I'll out you if you're not nice and pin your comment to the screen so everyone can read it. That's some accountability right there. Anyway, coming out twice. This was Katie's suggestion, and I'm glad that they suggested it because it's a thing. You know, we come out as neurodivergent, we come out as queer, not necessarily in that order. Well, I say LGBT plus because I know not everyone vibes with the word queer. Mm-hmm. I do because it's a very generic term in my opinion, and I still haven't really solidified my own sexuality, so I tend to just say queer. But yeah, coming out twice. Why is this important, Katie?
I think because it's different for different people, and because coming out isn't just a thing that you do once. It's not. Even now, when people say it, I think, oh, you know, and you come out and magically everyone knows now. You know, it's this great big ceremony where you tell the whole entire world that this is me, and everyone has whatever reaction they have to it. And now we should just be on our very merry neurodivergent queer way. But it's not. It's something we constantly do, especially for people like me who do like training and consultancy around this area, research around this area, because it shows people what position I'm coming from when I'm talking about these aspects of like autistic identity. So it's, yeah. And in some spaces, it was interesting when I did my master's. So for those who don't follow along with all the different bits that I get on with, I did my master's on trans and non-binary autistic people's narratives, and spoke to some really, really fantastic gender diverse autistic people. And some of them were talking about how they were really happy to be out as trans at work and how it really worked for them because of the name and their pronouns, and they felt they were based in the States, this person. And they were talking about how they felt that they had a lot more legal protection as a trans person within the workspace. But coming and saying you're autistic is, they said, not so clean cut. Because obviously you and I, David, are autistic, but we have very different things that we might need from a workplace. So whereas it might be a bit more, not necessarily clean cut for trans or gender diverse people, but if it's just names and pronouns and, you know, generally just an air of being respectable to people that you work with. And then other people I spoke to said, you know, I'm happy to be autistic, you know, openly autistic in my workspace, but wouldn't be openly queer. A teacher I spoke to said that. So it's really interesting who we tell, when we tell them, how we tell them, and why we do or don't tell people. It's really interesting.
I think this is a good jumping off point as well, because what we're essentially saying here is you have to judge your environment to know whether it's safe to come out, whether it be come out as autistic or come out as queer or come out as trans, or, you know, you can't do that if you're not safe. You know, you have to at least feel safe. And I think for me, one of the challenges has been that even if I feel safe to out myself on one of those things, it doesn't mean I am safe. There have been people who, when I felt safe to come out about things, have demonstrated that they were not safe to come out to.
Yeah. And I wonder also what that looks like with, we'll come back to safety in a minute, but I wonder what that also looks like with what you and I refer to as madness, but what other people might talk about mental health difficulties and differences. Like the safety there between saying, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, or I have a personality disorder or difference, or I have schizoaffective disorder, or whatever other things that people are kind of a part of their neurological makeup.
I know definitely for me, being out publicly about being schizophrenic is scary.
Mm.
It actually scares me more than being out publicly as queer and autistic and ADHD. Don't get me wrong, those things, I've taken heat for them. But for example, me as a schizophrenic person, that the stigma in particular there, and actually I think trans people can probably relate to this. People assume you're a threat.
Mm.
And I think that's definitely something trans people go through, especially in the current society.
Mm.
But for me as a schizophrenic, you tell someone you're hearing voices, they assume those voices are telling you to do horrible things.
Mm.
They assume that you're a risk to people.
Mm.
And that can be a really intense thing to try and navigate, because for me, my work demands authenticity. I'm encouraging people in my work to engage with parts of themselves they have not engaged with yet, and I can't do that whilst not doing it myself.
Yeah.
But there's always a slight, I think about it here, just an example of what I sort of go through with the schizophrenia. I will make a post about schizophrenia and not actually use the word schizophrenia because the algorithms will hide it, because they don't want you talking about schizophrenia. And that's sort of where it's at. And I think, with a lot of these topics around coming out with things, whether it's about your gender, your sexuality, your madness, your neurodiversity, society has this default thing that we should keep it to ourselves. Like, how many times have we heard as queer people, oh, well, I don't care what you do in the bedroom, just keep it to yourself.
Mm.
And
Yeah, whilst we have like heterosexuality pushed on us
yeah,
all the time through comic books and films and programs and stories, like everything is like, oh, a man and a woman and a man and a woman and a baby. And yeah.
But interestingly, I see this reflected in the way my brain works. When I try and explain, I've had people, when I've tried to explain autism or ADHD or schizophrenia, they go, why are you showing me this? This makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to see this. I'm like, right, but if it makes you uncomfortable that I have these struggles, imagine what it's like for me as the person. The reason I'm telling you this is so that life might get a tiny bit easier.
Yeah. But obviously, when we put stuff online, it's just for everyone else's benefit.
Yeah, and someone just commented that. Yeah.
It's not for our own. It's not like cathartic or anything like that. No, that's not. No.
But yeah, someone commented, we're rubbing their faces in it, apparently. Still can't use my pronouns, though.
Yeah.
And actually, since we mentioned pronouns, I've got to say, because I think we all know this one, it's like the perfect soundbite of society and their attitude towards gender diversity. I don't believe in pronouns. It's like, you use the English language. Like, pronouns are a core part of the English language. They have been around as long as the English language has. Like, what you don't agree with is people using pronouns that you haven't imposed on them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And the fact that they usually use pronouns when they actually say these things as well.
Yeah.
I, we, you, they, it.
Yeah.
It's all pronouns, darling. So,
like,
back in the day, we never used to have pronouns. Oh, did you not? All right, I see. Okay.
So, yeah, I guess this, this gets us to what we're talking about, which is we're living in a society that has these attitudes, and we're kind of, I don't know if you have this, but I felt quite a lot of pressure from other queer people and other neurodivergent people to be out. Like, it felt like if I wasn't out, then I wasn't being properly queer or properly autistic, or, you know, it felt I felt a level of, I was only authentically queer, for example, if I told people I was queer. Now, obviously, I know that's not true, and I've come to learn that's not true. You are valid whether you're out or not. But back when I was first exploring this in my late 20s, I thought I couldn't think of myself as queer because I wasn't telling people I was queer.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think that's with social validation, though, right? We're social creatures, even autistic people, and therefore, are we queer? If we were on a desert island and there were no other human beings, would we still be queer? And who would be around to know that, validate that, champion that, police that? You know, it's all a social thing, isn't it? I think I felt when I started doing social media that that there was a thing about writing all of like almost like a string of identities, you know, and those identities are really big for me and they're important for me, but I just don't hang my hat on them too much now. Like when you were saying about queer earlier, like that for me encapsulates my neurology and the way I move about in this world, and my physical disability and my chronic illness, and my queer sexuality and my queer gender and stuff like that. So for me, it's just easier just to say.
And I'm so glad you said that, because what I was about to say is, for me, my queerness is the juxtaposition to normativity. So, you know, it's not about who I'm sleeping with. You know, for the most part, people assume I'm straight. You know, I have a child. You know, I've been in straight passing relationships. People just assume I'm straight. But actually, queerness is, for me, not just about who I'm attracted to, who I'm sleeping with. For me, being queer is about the fact that I don't want to be under this weird hegemonic normativity that says I have to be a man a certain way, be a father a certain way, be a human a certain way. Like, I am who I am, and as long as I'm not doing harm, I don't see why I should have to fit anyone else's expectations. And that, for me, is where my queerness lies, and that broadly impacts many facets of my life. What's weird is that I still keep my queerness at arm's length.
Well, your sexual queerness, your romantic queerness, is what you mean?
Yeah.
Is it because it's too confusing? Like, is it too confusing? Like, not in a patronizing way. You just can't, like.
I think it's because people always have questions, and I don't really know how to answer them. You know, like, one of the questions that's come up before is like, so you're attracted to men. Well, I've never directly been in a relationship with a man or been heavily attracted to a man, but I don't rule out that that could happen at some point.
Okay.
For me, I don't tend to look at people and be like, I'm attracted to you because you're a woman. I'm attracted to you because you're non-binary. I look at people and go, I'm attracted to you because you're a person I'm attracted to. And by that logic, gender isn't really a factor for me. And that's why I'd probably describe my sexual queerness as being pansexual.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And there's a wider conversation to be had about how sick I am of frying pan jokes.
Yeah, literally. Oh, yeah, and then there's all this idea about bisexuals being somehow transphobic, like the idea of bisexual people and only liking two sexes or two genders is therefore inherently transphobic.
But have you noticed that a lot of these arguments come from people who have never bothered to read the definition of the word?
Well, and also I feel like definitions are very fluid anyways. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think there's, and again, it comes down to labeling things, I suppose, isn't it? Like, as soon as you label something and you give it a definitive definition, people who don't fit exactly within that box are therefore either not that thing or undefinable.
Mm.
And because the opposite of everything that's queer is cis and heterosexual, if you're not considered to be bisexual by whatever parameters someone's decided to put in for that, then you're automatically heterosexual. And that's the same with asexuality and with a lot of of sexualities, of course. But asexual people hear this all the time, like, well, you know, you have been sexually active, or you are sexually active, or, you know, well, you masturbate, or and therefore you're not a true asexual, or get asexuality and celibacy like mixed up and stuff like that.
So
Really weird kind of. The more you label things, sometimes, although it's useful for community activism and defining yourself and understanding who you are, like, also they can be quite restrictive, and then can start kind of these infighting things, and yeah, it's not helpful.
yeah, and Trudy on Facebook says it's who you make a romantic connection with. I've just happened to make that connection with the opposite sex for me. And this is another thing which I think makes it challenging to come out, is that, you know, people, it's like I said, people think we should be this fixed value. Oh, it keeps popping up. What's it doing? Yeah,
It
like,
was so good. We saw it twice, Trudy.
so like the one that jumps to mind for me, because there's a song going viral about it on TikTok at the moment. People assume that, for example, if a bisexual woman has a boyfriend, they're no longer bisexual. That's not how it works. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, like, for me, sexuality can shift. You know, I did used to identify broadly as asexual, and now I identify more as pansexual. So I like to go back to Nick Walker's quote, which is, you know, you can't unqueer a queer mind.
Yeah.
So I don't really believe that queer people become not queer people, because I think it's kind of like Pandora's box. Once you've opened it, everything's out. You know,
Too late, man. It's too late now.
Yeah, but I find it bizarre that people try and define us by who we're sleeping with. Like, I find that really weird. You know, like, I'm the same David whether I'm dating a man, a woman, a non-binary person, an agender person. I'm not going to list every gender I've ever heard of, don't worry, but you know, regardless of the gender identity of the person that I am dating or entangled with, I don't know the word, I'm not good with these words. You know, I'm still who I am. Like, that, I'm not defined by other people. And I think that was one of the things that perhaps made it difficult for me coming out, because when I first came out, I still used the term queer, but I broadly identified as asexual. And people go, oh, no, well, that's just because, you know, you've been through traumatic relationships, and when you heal from it. I was like, no, because now you're defining me by other people again. And
yeah. I think that's possibly why I don't talk about my sexuality that often. Like, I talk about being trans and non-binary all the time. Hello, welcome. This is what I talk about all the time. But yeah, like I said, I very rarely talk about my sexuality. And I think it's on the same, it's because of the same reason as you, but kind of the opposite, if that's going to make any sense, is that it's then a definition for me on what mine and Jay's, so Jay's my husband for people who don't know, what our physical relationship looks like, doesn't look like, whatever. And it's nobody else's business. It's nobody else's business.
yeah,
You know, so I think that's why for me it's not if people have a judgment on me, I'm not particularly bothered about that. You know, with regards to sexuality, I'm not particularly bothered about that. But it's whether that would then, but if someone said anything about Jay, I'd go, bad shit. So I think that's possibly why I don't talk about it so much. I think if I was a single person, or yeah, I think if I was single, I think that might be different. But like, yeah, or clearly in a queer relationship, I'd probably talk about that a bit more. But like, yeah, I don't understand that. Oh, but you know, you're a man with a woman, then therefore you're not bisexual. Yeah, but presumably heterosexual people who aren't in relationships don't stop being heterosexual. It's not like your knob falls off. Do you know? is this what's happening over here? Is this why the heterosexuals are so sad all the time? Like,
is this why they're all so angry?
Yeah, just knob falling off, man. I hate when that happens.
Be honest, I'd probably be less angry and more just deeply concerned if that happened to me.
yeah, like if that happens, you need to go see a medical practitioner.
Yeah, I'd be like, I'm sure that's not supposed to happen. But here's a question: Did you identify your neurodivergence first or your queerness first, and what order did you come out in?
I have known about my sexuality for a long time, and I like maybe like 9, 10, something like that. But I was kind of always of this opinion, and this was before trans, non-binary, even my understanding of intersex people was like a thing. So I was always of the opinion that bisexual is two, and therefore it means the two sexes, which obviously is like completely and utterly incorrect anyways. But that was my 11-year-old brain. And it felt weird that I was attracted to one more than the other. So I remember having a bit of a like, is this actually, or is this not? Or like, am I gay, or am I bi, or is this just like what normal teenagers, like all teenagers, I don't mean normal, like all teenagers go through, or, whatever. I don't know, being a teenager is a pain in the ass. So I've always understood that about my sexuality. I didn't realize I was neurodivergent, or didn't have a word for it until I was about 25, 26, working with the young neurodivergent people that I work with, and just really recognizing myself in them. And then, I've spoken about this before, where I find that once I've kind of unwrapped, like I see my brain, not all of my brain, but enough of it to be like, when in horror films they have kind of like dusty attics with, like, and a bird flies through and there's all these boxes under these drapes and stuff. That's kind of what my brain's like. And once I've opened one drape and looked through the boxes under there, I feel like, oh, there's another one over there. So I think that's what happened with my neurodivergence. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm autistic and OCD, so I got diagnosed two for the price of one. And then thought, there's other stuff in here I've got to unpack. That would be really good to do that. So I think my formal diagnosis was a stepping stone to my understanding my transness, which is still in, I say trans, but like it's a bit more complicated than that, but trans, non-binary, agender-y type situation. So what was it for you?
For me, it was my madness that slapped me in the face in my teenage years. And I'd kind of been orbiting the world of neurodivergence, being autistic, ADHD for most of my life, but it was the madness that jumped out and was like, hey, I'm here. And what's weird is sort of I got my formal diagnosis of autism, and it kind of desensitized me to everything else. So I suddenly had a much easier time just going like, yeah, I'm not like what you would call normal. And I think by the time I'd gone through psychosis and addiction and then been diagnosed autistic, by the time I got to my late 20s and started to question whether or not I was queer, like sexually queer, it wasn't actually, I mean, it was a big deal, but compared to what it could have been, I was way more comfortable with it myself than I think other people would have been. And there were definitely people in my life, not people who are still in my life, but there were people in my life who were less comfortable with it than I was. But for me, being out, you know, we called this coming out twice. For me, I kind of came out 3 times with the schizophrenia. But for me, being out as one makes me want to be out with the others because they're all part of the story. They're all related to each other. Like each part forms the whole. I don't really want to use the puzzle piece analogy, but I'm going to have to here. Like they are all pieces of a puzzle that make a whole picture. And if I was just out as one of them, people are only getting a small part of the picture and might misinterpret who I am. But the problem is that, as we discussed earlier, you know, schizophrenia is not an easy one to be out on because people assume you're dangerous. Being neurodivergent is not easy to be out on because people seem to read no further than the DSM, if they've even read the DSM. And being out as sort of queer, I suppose even genderqueer, because I don't use just he, him pronouns. And I identify as male, but not like that, if you know what I mean. You know, everyone's going to have a shitty opinion about some part of who I am. So I'd rather it's all out there so they've got the whole picture to form a shitty opinion about.
Yeah. If you're going to be shitty, at least be correct.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong.
References people.
There's a multitude of things that I could do better or shouldn't have done in the past. So there's plenty to pick from. So actually, my queerness, my neurodivergence, my madness, you're going for low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, for real.
Like,
yeah, for real. Yeah. And you don't, like, obviously you and I are both part of Autistic Inclusive Meets Aim for the Rainbow, which is like their queer volunteer. Sorry, I'm ever so itchy. I've been bitten quite a few times over the weekend. I can't stop itching my blooming arms. Yeah, so obviously we've written stuff on there, both of us, not together, I don't think, but separately on there about sexuality. Obviously, I talk about that kind of thing all the time anyways, because of my work and stuff. But I wonder if I did something that wasn't in the realms of that, whether I'd be so interested in it. Or am I interested in it because I'm queer, or am I... Yeah, because I always find it very strange when I hear like people doing work on substance use when they don't have any kind of personal connection to it. That's not saying that people shouldn't do research on that area or be knowledgeable about that area or whatever. It's just I always think, oh, so you've used substances then? No. Or so something like close to or whatever. No, I'm just interested in it. Without a personal connection. Does that exist?
You know, there is that problem as well, isn't there? Because without having a foot in the door, without having that personal connection, you can understand it theoretically, but theoretical interpretations can, as we know from autism research, theoretical interpretations can be a mile away from the lived experience.
Yeah, but allies still exist, of course.
They do.
Number, but
But
yeah.
I think sometimes we become experts in our own experience because we don't want other people to face the same bullcrap that we've faced.
Yeah.
I know for me, the whole reason I do the things I do is because I want to be the person that I needed when I was discovering all this.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
You know, and I hope that I can be that person for others. I mean, yeah, it benefits me too, because I spend a lot of time looking inward and working out why I do the things I do, and that helps me. But for me, you know, I think about how lonely I was before I came out and discovered a whole community, and I want to be an open door, something that people can step into and feel at home.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's why a lot of neurodivergent and or LGBTQIA plus admins, activists, whatever you want to call us online, advocates, we get called a lot, don't we? I think that's why a lot of us do what we do, really. And that entirely makes sense. Like the area of, the area in research and just in general knowledge and knowledge that's out there on specific trans autistic issues is, as an example, is very there's not much of it, and what is out there unfortunately is prevalence rates, and you know, well, of course you don't know how to human properly, so of course you're not going to know how to gender properly and stuff like that as well. So I think when it comes to really niche experiences, because you started your advocacy work as around substance use, didn't you?
Yeah.
Around autistic and ADHD substance use. So I think that's where a lot of us come into the wider autism or LGBTQIA plus game, is that we start off with something niche that we need to talk about for whatever reason, and then we're like, well, this other interesting shiny stuff is going on as well.
And since we've talked about the whole schizophrenia thing and you just brought up substance use, we should probably think about, sometimes we have to come out as identities we'd rather not be or have. We're not always, like, not everyone is at peace with the identities they have. And some of those identities, there's good reason. Like I said, being schizophrenic, being a recovering addict, there is a lot of bullshit that goes around about those things. And there are times when I think, do you know what? I really wish that I didn't have this. Like, you know? And I think that's relevant to this conversation of coming out twice, because particularly, I think, obviously being sexually queer or gender divergent, you know, there are people who are going to make you wish you weren't, because that's shitty. There's shitty people. But also coming out as neurodivergent can be a real challenge for people, because there are people who will straight up be like, no, you're not. No, because my cousin's wife's third dog's aunt has an autistic dog. It's nothing like you. You know,
It's
you're
almost
not
like we're
autistic.
two separate people.
Yeah, like it can leave you just wishing that you didn't have an identity to come out with.
Yeah, kind of. But how boring would that be?
It would be, and I think it's what makes the world really interesting, is that we have all these different identities and experiences. But what really grinds my gears is that there are people who try to make you ashamed of those, make you wish you weren't those. Like, why should it be this hard to come out? Why do we even need to have a conversation about coming out? Why isn't it just with people, and people are different? Like,
yeah. I think that's the thing with going back to labels again, is it's a we use it to understand ourselves, but then also it's how that is responded to by other people.
Yeah. Well, Sharon's just put a response in the comments saying, quote marks, everyone somewhere on the spectrum.
Literally.
Could you imagine if they did this when you came out as gay? Like, well, everyone's a little bit gay.
Oh my God, I would love that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
I'd be like, oh yes, finally, hooray! Yeah,
Damn it, we just gave away the queer agenda. We're going to make everyone just a little bit gay.
just a little bit. Just dip your toe in, honey, and then you tell me you don't like it. All right? Yeah, everyone. Yeah, I don't understand that. I think the difference between saying everyone's on an autistic spectrum, whatever that might be, as opposed to a queer spectrum, whatever that may also be, is that it's so layered. So, like, when you do strange things, people are like, as an autistic person, when you do strange, annoying, whatever things, people will say, why are you doing those things? And then you'll be like, oh, I'm autistic. And then as soon as you say you're autistic, they're like, oh, but you're so normal though. Which obviously normal is an issue anyways, but like, oh, you don't act like that. Okay, so all the times that you've called me weird or said I was annoying or too loud or arrogant or blah, 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 all these other things, which are very specifically to do with my autistic behaviors. Now I've told you that I'm autistic. You're just like, you'd be just a human like everybody else. Yeah, I said I'm autistic, not a human.
Yeah.
So there's that side of things. But then I think that people will gaslight autistic behavior, suggest that it is part of human behavior because we're also humans. So everyone kind of feels like they might want to be on the autism spectrum or think that they're on this, or which is their idea anyways. I don't like the idea of an autism spectrum. I think you're either autistic or you're not. But whereas I think with a queer spectrum, oh no, I'm not. You know, like the super straights and all of that. Oh no, oh God, no! I've never even looked at a man. I've never even looked. Like every time there's a man in the room, I close my eyes.
Alpha
I don't want to be one of those homosexuals. You know, like people don't want people who aren't queer don't really want.
That just makes, like I was saying, it makes me think of those alpha male people who always have to make videos about the fact they're alpha males. Like,
if you're alpha male, mate, you wouldn't have to make a video about it because everyone would know. Everyone would know.
Yeah, it's based, for starters, on wolf packs, which don't have alphas. That was debunked years ago. And secondly, like, you're not an alpha male. Like, you're just an awful person.
Yeah. Yeah. You might be called like Mr. Toxic Masculinity. Like, I'll take that. You know,
yeah,
that's fine. That's okay. But no, alpha male. Don't tell me you're an alpha male, darling, because that's just so. Oh,
I've got to be honest. It's the prevalence of toxic masculinity that makes me feel like I'm not like a man. I'm just a man, like a queer man.
okay.
Like, because I don't get me wrong, I've been caught up in toxic masculinity over the years. I think every man in existence has, because it's sort of what we're told to do repeatedly from a young age. But for me, it feels so alien to be like that these days that sometimes I'm like, am I a man, or am I a man, or am I a man? And it gets very confusing because it's just taken for granted now that men are dicks, which a lot of them are. I know I am one. But why toxic masculinity? At what point did we decide, do you know what we need from our men? Insecurity that they make everybody else's problem.
I wonder whose idea that was.
All ideas start somewhere. We need to trace this back so I can go back in time and give them a slap.
Yeah. I have a feeling they probably had a penis.
Probably.
Yeah, 100%. That's what happened.
This is my point. Most of the things that really annoy me come from those sorts of people.
Yes. So, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I can't really offer anything that isn't trans related. So, yeah. But yeah, toxic masculinity, yeah, destroys everyone, to be fair. So, but there's all these ideas about how we're supposed to be men, women, girls, you know.
I find it bizarre that there are men who will tell me I'm less of a man because I will cook a meal for my family.
Who has said that?
It's been not been said directly to me, but I have seen other men say that men shouldn't be doing the cooking, and I'm like, you live
Are you
on
allowed
your
to
own.
do the eating?
Like, from my point, with a lot of them is they live on their own because they're, remember, dreadful people.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
like,
Manage it, yeah.
are they? How do they survive? Like,
I don't know. Maybe their mums are still making them stuff and traipsing them around in a little lunchbox or something. I
but
don't know.
wouldn't that be like the ultimate way of undermining themselves? Like, this is what I struggle with as someone who broadly identifies as male, and I should say loosely identifies at this point, because so much of what is supposed to make you a man, according to like Western colonial society, makes absolutely no sense. It just feels arbitrary and poorly thought out.
Yeah. But then can you not say that about gender in general anyways?
Yeah,
Like
well,
as a binary gender, like it
there,
just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
there's a broader conversation to be had about how much of everything we take for granted is socially constructed. And you know I love talking about social constructionism, but I probably shouldn't go off on a rant about that right now.
I know we were talking about gay stuff, but now we're going to talk about social constructivism. Constructionism for the next, half an hour, if you don't mind, everybody.
But no, we should probably come back to the whole coming out twice thing, because
yeah, please.
I think we've laid out why it's a challenge. You know, we're not just coming out once; we're coming out twice. In my case, just it seems to be a daily occurrence. I find something new to come out about, like.
You know what's also a thing that people come out about all the time? Well, there's loads of things, right? So we were just talking about substance use and it's annoying me now. Substance use and queerness, neurodivergence, madness. But you know, there's loads of other things that people come out about all the time. I feel like ethnicity and race is a thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like people are probably forced into that more than anything.
Yeah.
Which is really rough. Where do you come from? You know, just Ealing, mate. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not exotic, you know. Oh, I was because I'm black, right? Okay, right. You're asking me what my cultural heritage is. Yeah, and it's such a strange thing for people to want to know about other people, like as the first thing, as if, you know, like if I knew someone was Caribbean, like what would I know about the Caribbean I could bring to my construction of who this person is in my brain? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that with people who are considered white or perceived as white, you know, having to come out about their Jewishness or their cultural heritage or ethnicity, race, whatever, like, and then people going, "Oh God, never would have thought that."
What's really fun for me is like half my family is Northern Irish and half my family is Greek. So during the colder months, I am very, very white, and then during the summer months, you might have started to notice I start to darken, and I just carry on darkening until the sun goes away again. Like, so, like people, I remember I used to live in a particular city. I won't name it, Bradford. And
Someone's got to live there, David. You know,
it was the most confusing experience of my life. And yes, this is a tangent, but this is David's divergent discussion, so bear with me because it's hilarious.
I'm aboard.
I was very tanned because it was summer and I'm half Greek, and someone called me a Nazi. I was like, I think you're trying to be racist, but doing it really badly. I was like, I'm a dark-skinned, dark-haired, I had long curly ringlet hair that made me look like I was sort of Greek Orthodox. I was like, do you know what a Nazi is? Like, have you studied history? That it was bizarre. And I still have dreams about this because my brain has to revisit it and be like, did that really happen?
Yeah.
But no, this is that thing. People, if we don't, this is one of the things that annoys me about coming out, is that if we don't come out, people will come out for us and they'll do it wrong.
Yeah.
Like if you're not openly autistic, you're lazy or too emotional or too much, or
100%.
you talk too much. You know, if you don't come out as gay, you're effeminate, and like people. In the absence of coming out, people will add their own shitty takes. I mean, they do that anyway, but they do it in a particular way when you're not out about something. And I don't know why people think they have a right to define other people's identities.
Yeah, 100%. I want to just go back to you being called a Nazi a minute because it reminded me of another story. I used to go out with someone from Northern Ireland, and he was telling me a story about someone he knew back home, and about the fact that they really needed to know whether someone was Catholic or Protestant, and had met someone in the pub who was Muslim, and they were like, but are you Protestant Muslim or are you Catholic Muslim? Like, you don't really work that way. I just thought that was a little something to add in there, just the kind of ridiculous things that people get asked and told all the time.
But this is my point. I think this is why a lot of us actually come out, is because it stops people just thinking up their own realities. Like, like sometimes I think sometimes coming out is if you're going to assume things about me, I should at least own it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Because I think I said this quite a while ago on, oh goodness, I think I was talking to Laura Helfeld actually. And we were talking about labels and about whether it was part of a larger discussion, but whether labels create vulnerability for people because then there is something, oh, well, you're autistic, whatever. But what you've illustrated there is that if you don't have the autistic label or the whatever label it might be, people don't need those labels because they are going to make up their own and they are going to be pretty awful for the most part.
There's a kind of insidious, like it's very insidious. There's like almost like a predatory culture, at least in the UK, where people will seek out vulnerabilities and lay them bare rather than let people just be themselves.
I see this all the time on trans pages, and when people get things so incredibly wrong because I don't know, for some, I've seen it loads over the last couple of weeks. For some reason, some people think that trans women are the only trans people that exist, right? So every trans admin or whatever who's online is therefore a person who, in their words, wants to be a woman. So these non-binary people and agender people that I've been following have all been called like, you'll never be a real woman, and they're like, oh, thank you very much. I'm really pleased about that. It's really quite affirming that you're saying
it's
that.
one that you can always tell, crowd, as well.
Yeah. Oh, they can always tell. Oh, they can always tell. Yeah. That's strange, isn't it? Yeah, that's another strange thing. Not only do we need to know who you might be having sexual relations with, but I need to know how you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because you are creeps and weirdos. Yeah, but I'm not being creepy by asking you or telling you how you're doing it.
The thing that never makes sense to me is that, like, people make horrible accusations about trans people, particularly trans people who work with children.
Mm-hmm.
And yet those same people have an obsession with what's between that trans person's legs.
Yeah,
now, you tell me what's more predatory.
Yeah, 100%.
Reading storybooks or asking someone what genitalia they have.
And I think it'd be hard. I think it would be a hard thing to find a trans advocate or admin online who hasn't been called a paedophile at one point or another, or continuously. As we know from our friend Sab at Drag Queen Story Hour, happens to them quite a lot. So I just think,
and they literally, their job is reading wholesome story books to children. Like this is my point. Like they're just doing something nice, something good, and people have to come in and be like, "Hello, I'm a dickhead."
I think. Sorry, carry on.
No, that was sort of the end of my point.
Oh, okay. So obviously, this won't necessarily link to them, but I think this is where toxic masculinity comes in as well. So I've been working in the early years in some way or other for about 9-10 years now, and have only ever worked with one man. And I don't know, there's just this kind of stigma around men who work in the early years.
Yeah.
And even early years teaching, like year 1, 2. So we're talking, like, for people who might not know what that means, like 5 to 9-year-olds, something like that. But as soon as you become a secondary teacher, that's all right for men to do. But, but like anything before that, it's like, yeah, but how can we trust you around children?
I will say there's an extra layer there if you're an autistic person who is perceived to be male. Like being an autistic, visibly man autistic, like people do make some pretty nasty comments. And I've definitely had them thrown at me in the past. Purely
with young people?
I mean, not by anyone I work with, obviously, but by outsiders, let's say. You know, because I'm weird. You know, I'm weird. I'm happy to say that. I'm a weird person. But when you mix weirdness with being male, particularly if you're a male who works with children, people will start to make assumptions and accusations.
That's really interesting then, isn't it? And I don't think if you work with children, if you're a good practitioner who works with children, I think there's always a weirdness there. Because you have to be fun to work with children. Like, otherwise they don't want to, they're not interested, are they?
I've never met an interesting neurotypical teacher. Every teacher I've had.
Jay sat here with like 13 years worth of teaching experience going, nodding his head. There we are. That's it. Conclusive.
I don't get me wrong. I believe neurotypicals can achieve just as much as neurodivergent people if they're given the right accommodations, but they struggle with.
They really do, man. They all about that eye contact. You know, standing still. It's all just.
It must be a nightmare trying to keep eye contact with a class of 30 different people.
God, there's eyes everywhere. There's eyes everywhere. And they have a different lunch every day. Oh, they don't know if they're coming or going. Oh, poor beggars. I just don't know. Don't know.
But this is, I think, because we're getting close to wrapping up, I think this is a good comment to highlight. So Trudy says, I'm tired of all the hate in the world. It feels like it's getting worse. I don't know if that's because of social media and I was just oblivious in the 90s because we didn't have all this access to people's thoughts and opinions. I think that's a valid point. You know, don't get me wrong. I think the internet's done wonders for minority groups. You know, it's allowed a level of collective community organizing that we didn't have before. But it does mean that the people who cause us harm are also able to organize and voice their opinions largely unscathed. Because I think most of us have probably reported a really questionable opinion on social media and had the reply back of, this doesn't violate our community standards. It's like, it should.
Yeah, because I've just stopped having DMs on Facebook. Like, I just can't take DMs on Facebook anymore because actually
I'm getting close to it, and I think, you know, it can be a challenge being a content creator having your DMs open because you've got so many people who then have unfettered access to you.
Yeah, 100%.
And on some of them, you don't want them to have unfettered access to you.
And it will be mostly, I don't know if in your experience, it will be mostly something that I've closed comments on, and then people will come into my DMs and add something to it.
So
No,
I think
this is an unsafe thing because I've set a boundary here by closing off comments. Now
this
you
might
are
be,
talking to me directly, and you don't
yeah,
have my permission for that.
this might be my male privilege, but that doesn't happen to me as often. It does happen, but not as often, I think, as it does to some other intersections. I also think people tend not to give me as much crap because not only am I male, I'm a human mountain. Like, I'm 6'4", I weigh well over 20 stone. I'm literally like a walking oak tree. People don't tend to come at you when, like, you're a huge guy. And I think that's some privilege I have there. But even online where people can't see my size, I wonder sometimes if I take a bit less crap than other creators I see purely because I'm a male and people question men less.
Yeah, I have absolutely no doubt of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. That's not minimizing your experience of things, but yeah.
Oh no, I mean, I'll happily say, well, not happily say, that there's crappy things about being an autistic male. However, there's a lot of things that are damn sight easier because I'm a male and not non-binary or female or agent. I'm doing that thing where I list all the genders I've heard of.
Yeah.
We could be here for a really long time. But yeah, I think online spaces have kind of been a double-edged sword because for me, it was online spaces that made me so confident I could come out and step into my community. But online spaces are also where I've taken a lot of the crap. And actually, sometimes it's from other members of my own community.
Yeah. I was going to say that. Yeah, sorry, Karen.
We can't deny there is identity politics involved in any kind of non-normative community.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a function of how much trauma we've experienced collectively in trying to protect ourselves and advance forward from that trauma. But sometimes we become very fixed in our opinions, and that's not always as helpful as we think it is.
Yeah. And also, like, you shared something, I think you wrote it quite a while back, but you shared something about the fact that not all autistic people are nice. Like,
that
you're autistic doesn't
that got reshared a few days ago. But yeah, not every member of a minority group is a nice person.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, that's a way we infantilize minority groups or dehumanize them. It's just as much as viewing all of them as bad, viewing all of them as good is just as harmful.
Yeah.
100%.
What I was going to say about when you were saying about getting your worst kind of flack or whatever from within autistic communities, I would say that also about queer spaces, not so much online, but definitely like queer clubbing and stuff when I was younger. Just like that's the biggest place that I've ever experienced biphobia, like 100%, hands down. They were the spaces that I was more up until a couple of years ago. Obviously, when I started living my life out loud online, there was the spaces that I was openly bisexual in the most, but also the place that it was just like, kind of, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Like, oh, but you're dancing with a bloke or blah 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 blah, and it's just really
well, for what it's worth, I think to wrap it up, any community space I'm running will aim to be as friendly as possible. I can't account for what other people are doing, but if I see people being dicks, I will yeet them into the sun. And I suspect that your spaces are I know your spaces are quite friendly. I have followed you on social media for many years. So
I'm a relatively friendly person. Like, so there's something that David and I were talking about this before we even started on applied applied behavioral analysis, ABA, that I shared earlier, which is a whole conversation for another time. But yeah, just constantly watching that to make sure that people are having conversations around it that aren't personal attacks on either side, or whatever. Like it's a hard, like woe is me, but it's a hard thing to be an admin sometime and keep things safe, but I see a lot of very large queer pages that just up the comment sections ran rampant with transphobia, and the admins aren't doing anything about it, and it's just not safe spaces.
This is something that I don't think people realize sometimes, because I know on my part, like I have multiple accounts on different platforms with thousands of followers on each. Facebook alone has about 25,000 followers. I try my best to check every single comment that comes in every day to make sure that space is staying safe. And this is what I try to get across to people. Doing that is exhausting. Particularly because my community is an intersectional community. We have so many minority identities all clubbed together here. Trying to keep it safe for everyone can be a challenge, but I do try and keep it safe for everyone. So, people can explore who they are without fear of someone being unkind.
Yeah. Well, I will just say on that, if I may round it up, David, is that because we're doing this for the trans aware cancer care that I'm doing, the project I'm involved with, and talking about safe spaces and actually calling them safer spaces as opposed to safe spaces, because obviously, like you were saying, you as a perceived male leading, or whatever it is we're going for you, David, as a perceived male autistic person, let's just put it that way, would be very different to me as a non-male autistic person. So what would be safe for you would be different for me, would be different for all sorts of different intersections. So it's very difficult to say this is a safe space, because it depends what your safety looks like, of course.
Yeah, but we can do our best to make it as safe as possible.
Yeah.
But no, I'm really grateful. We've had a lot of people listening, and everyone's been very respectful, which I really appreciate. And it doesn't always go that way, because sometimes when you have a lot of people, you attract the wrong people. But no, it's been a really good episode. I've really enjoyed it. We'll be back next Monday, either with a guest or just the two of us again, depending on who we can book in, because we are doing one every Monday this month for Pride Month, I believe.
Yes, we are, if that was a question to me. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, we look forward to seeing you all next Monday for whatever topic we cook up. We're kind of ADHDing this and seeing where it takes us. We are looking at a couple of guests, so hopefully we'll have that booked in. For anyone who hasn't caught it yet, there's a link going across the bottom of the screen. I did a survey of people's preferences around autism language. Now, this isn't to make it, some legally binding document, but I thought it just interests people to see where people's opinions lie. The first sort of report is out, and I've compared autistic and non-autistic people's views. Interestingly, not that different from each other. Where the difference lies is in what professionals are using, by the looks of it, which I think is very interesting and reflects a lot of what's being said at the moment. So, go to emergentdivergence.com/autism language preference survey 2024, because I love long links. You can check it out there. I'll try and throw it in the comments as well, so that people can find it there, or you can just go on my Facebook page and it'll be there somewhere, because I'll probably forget to put it in the comments, if I'm honest. But yeah.
And anyone who's watching or listening will forget to look it up. So
yeah, we're neurodivergent. We shouldn't make these kinds of commitments.
Yeah. Oh God.
Anyway, it's been great having you all. Thank you very much, Katie. As always, wonderful. we got to talk about gay shit. We're going to talk about even more gay shit. I'm really looking forward to it. But we don't get to do this often enough. You know, we're always like Spectrum 10K or something like that. But, you know, now we're getting to talk about gay shit, you know, and I'm going to keep calling it that till it sticks, because that's what I think people should be exclusively referring to this as now.
It's true. That's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
All
My
right.
research. Gay shit.
Exactly. So I will see you all next week, and I'm going to go before the inertia kicks in.
Fab.
Goodbye.
Bye.